Hi, welcome to Block 1, Constructing, Measuring, and Using Geometric Notation. Lesson 10. I'll share my screen. So, in your previous lesson, you recognize different types of triangles and you use that knowledge to answer some interesting questions. So, you're gradually increasing in your knowledge. In today's lesson, you're going to learn to recognize different types of quadrilateral, their names, their properties, and how to use that knowledge to answer some interesting questions. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the notification bell so that when new videos are released, you will be notified. You can also share the video with those you think can benefit from it. Thank you. Before we start, I would like you to pause the video and answer these retrieval practice questions in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So for the first one, you were asked which of the line segments are parallel. Parallel lines all move in the same direction. And looking at these, you would see that line segments AB, CD, and IJ are parallel. Next, we're asked which line segments are equal in length in the polygon. Notice the hash marks. So when you see shapes where the hash marks are the same, then you know that those line segments are equal in length. Next, you were asked to classify the triangle. So in our previous lesson, you learned that, so those other parts are equal. So going back to question 2. In our previous lesson, going back to question 3, in our previous lesson, we learned that those two hatch marks in a triangle show that that's an isosceles triangle, and the base angles would be equal. Let's do some new learning for this lesson. Looking at these shapes, what do you think is the same about these shapes and what's different? Well, let's start talking about things that we feel are the same. First thing, we know that there are 2D shapes and they have 4 straight sides. Now, shapes that have 4 straight sides, we call them quadrilaterals. Quad means 4 and laterals mean sides. So they're shapes that have 4 sides. Let's talk about the first one, rectangle. For a rectangle has 2 pairs of parallel sides, and we can see them there. Parallel sides all move in the same direction and they will never meet. And it has another pair of parallel sides there. It also has 2 pairs of equal sides. So for a rectangle, you know that the opposite sides are equal in length. So if that side is 7 centimeter, the other side will be 7 centimeter. It also, if that side is 4 centimeter, then this side will be 4 centimeter. All angles are equal. So it has all 4 right angles being 90 degrees each. So the sum of the angles in a quadrilateral is equal to 360 degrees. Of course, take note that we're talking about the interior angles. A rectangle is actually, a square is actually a special rectangle. So take note of that. So a square has, this special rectangle has 2 pairs of parallel sides. The sides are all equal. Okay, 2 pairs of equal sides, and all the angles are right angles. Okay, and all sides are, of course, equal. So a square is actually a special rectangle. And you can see the hatch marks showing that all the sides are equal. So all squares are rectangles. So take note of that. Here is another special one. We would call this shape has 2 pairs of parallel sides. It has the other side being parallel, and you can see the different hatch marks showing the pairs of parallel sides that are equal. and it has two pairs of equal opposite angles. So you can see the hatch marks that show the pairs of opposite angles that are equal. We call this a parallelogram. Now, sometimes in 2D, when this is drawn on paper, you would see this look like this. So, but this is done in this perspective so that you can actually visualize it properly. Here is another special one. Imagine if we were to put this shape on its side. Some people call this diamond. Okay. So this shape here is called a rhombus. So first, let's talk about the properties. It has two pairs of parallel sides. All sides are equal. And it has two pairs of opposite angles. So it maintains most of the properties that the parallelogram has. And when put on the side, when you draw it as it is shown here, you would see it mostly written like this, and some people call it diamond. One way to think about it is imagine a rectangle that has been pushed sideways. So you squash the rectangle a little bit and you have a parallelogram. Squash a square a little bit and you have a rhombus. Okay? Right. Which shape? Why is this shape not a rectangle? And why is this shape not a square? Of course, the angles are not equal. Remember, for a square, the angles are equal. They are each 90 degrees. But here you have opposite pairs that are equal, opposite pairs of angles that are equal, both for the square and for the rhombus. So a parallelogram is not a rectangle and a rhombus is not a square, even though it may look like it. Here is another one. This one has one pair of parallel sides and then two pairs of parallel sides. Which one would you pick? Of course, it doesn't have two pairs of parallel sides because you can clearly see that it only has one pair of parallel sides. Did you remember a lesson where we explored this shape and different forms of this shape? Of course, you should know that all angles are equal. Of course not. The angles are not equal. That name is trapezium. So here are things that this shape are not. It does not have two pairs of parallel sides. All sides are not equal and all angles are not equal. It only has one pair of parallel sides. And that is a trapezium. Here is this one. What do you notice about this shape? So here are some of the properties. It has two pairs of adjacent equal sides. Adjacent means just sitting next to each other. And those sides are these that are showing the hatch marks. It also has one pair of equal opposite angles. One pair of equal opposite angles. So the angles here and the angles here. And these are the angles. And you can see, just to repeat, the other pair of adjacent equal sides. So this pair and that pair. That is called a kite. All right. So a kite has all these properties. It's now time for you to use your knowledge to do some practice. So pause the video and answer the questions in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So for question 1, you were asked to name the quadrilaterals. So by now, you should have mastered the quadrilaterals, know their names, and know what they look like. So these are the quadrilaterals. So this is a rhombus, that's a trapezium, parallelogram, square, and a rectangle. Have you noticed the difference between the square and the rhombus? So never you make that mistake. And have you noticed the difference between the rectangle and the parallelogram? Pause the video and answer questions 2 and 3 in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered questions 2 and 3, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. Here you were asked, ABCD is a quadrilateral. Measure the sides and angle of ABCD and label them on the diagram. Of course, you use a ruler to do this. You measure the angles at 90 degrees and then you give it a name. It's a square. Next, we're asked, draw and label the shape on the grid. For a rectangle, that's the shape, trapezium, and a parallelogram. So if you got that right, mark your work and celebrate your success. Well done. Pause the video and answer question 4 in 3 minutes. If you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So here you were asked, write a definition of a rectangle. There are various answers. So some people would use the property that a rectangle has a pair of parallel sides of which all the angles are 90 degrees each, right? So there are different definitions. Then here you were asked to tick the rectangles and you can see the rectangles here. So remember, someone may be wondering, why was this third one ticked? It was ticked because a square, remember, is a special rectangle. So do not forget that information. Here is this one. Let's do some new learning. Here, Amir says this is a trapezium, and then Whitney says it isn't a trapezium as it has two sides of equal length. All right. A trapezium just has one pair of parallel sides. Who do you agree with? Explain. So have a think, pause it, have a chat with somebody you're watching the video with, or you can discuss it, having a little thinking time to yourself. Well, this is an isosceles trapezium. Did you remember in one of our lessons? And how do we know? We can see these hatch marks which show that these sides are equal. And we can see that it has a pair of parallel sides. So this is an isosceles trapezium. I want you to pause the video, see how many quadrilaterals you can draw with exactly 1 right angle, 2 right angles, and 4 right angles. Also 3 right angles. See whether you can come up with a number of quadrilaterals. Well, you may have come up with these. So for 4 right angles, you may have come up with these 2 rectangles, the square and the actual rectangle. Remember, a square is a special rectangle. And you may have come up with a kite. So a kite has 90 degrees at that point where the first pair of adjacent sides are equal. You may have come up with a trapezium. But you cannot have a quadrilateral that has 3 right angles. Because if we have to come up with a trapezium that is different from different from the square or the rectangle that has 3 right angles, then the third one is going to have to be 90 to make 360. Because remember, a quadrilateral has 360 degrees in its interior angles. It's now time for you to pause the video and have a practice. So pause the video and practice question 5 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So you were simply asked to match the shapes to their properties. This really helps you to think about the different properties you've been exploring about quadrilaterals. Pause the video and answer question 6 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 6, Here are the answers. So here you were asked, Teddy says, my shape is a quadrilateral. It has one pair of parallel sides and two right angles. That should be a trapezium. Okay, should be a trapezium. And we call it a right trapezium. Yeah, when it has a right angle trapezium, or a right trapezium when it's a trapezium that looks like this. Pause the video and answer questions 7 and 8 in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So here you were asked, each statement you should write, is each statement true or false? We know that a square is a special rectangle and all rectangles are not squares. It's false. Yeah. All rectangles are not squares, but all squares are rectangles, right? All rectangles are parallelograms. That's false. All rectangles are parallelograms. Yes, we can say it's true because we have parallelograms have two pairs of parallel sides. That is what gives it its name. So it's true. Then question 8, two isosceles triangles are joined to make a quadrilateral. And you can see here. What quadrilaterals can be formed? So if we have two isosceles triangles and we put them together, we could form a kite. We could also form a square. And you can see it here. Pause the video and discuss question 9 with your partner or somebody you're studying with. And here is the answer. ABC is a rectangle, one vertex is moved, and ABCD is now a trapezium. Which vertex could have been moved and in which direction? Yeah. So it could have been the left. Yeah. Could have been the left vertex. And there are more than one answer to this. So you can discuss it with somebody you're studying with, and you can use it as a point of discussion for the lesson. Well done for sticking around and for taking your learning seriously. So you have learned about recognizing different types of quadrilaterals, their properties, and how to identify them. And you've answered some interesting questions. You have learned about the square, you've learned about the rectangle, you've learned about the rhombus, you've learned about the kite, you've learned about the parallelogram, and you have learned about the trapezium. Well done for taking your learning seriously. Until next time, take really good care of yourself, and bye-bye.